Hey everyone, and welcome to Found Friday. Today is our second Friday the 13th this year, so really excited for that. Hopefully this time we don't lose internet connection. Today we're talking about how to use marketing intelligence to prevent customer churn. So what we're really talking about is once you've got people on board and kind of into your organization, long-term growth really means talking about retaining existing customers and hopefully building kind of a base of brand evangelists too. So what we don't want to do is pass that job off to just people in kind of customer support or account management, because there's a lot of great information that comes in through marketing and that can be built on from the content that we're already creating to kind of make sure that you keep your customer base. So with me, of course, as always, I have Ray, and this is actually something that Ray and I talk about a lot, and we touched on a little bit at the end of last week's show. So let's talk a little bit about why customer churn is such a big deal for companies.
Yeah, we look at, and churn is actually, people usually talk about churn in the context of like a B2B or a SaaS company, but churn actually could also happen in e-commerce. It's just, it looks a little bit different, and it's usually not called churn. But when you think about retention, the key to any business and growing it over the long term is retention and recurring revenue. And so from a SaaS perspective, obviously that means you're keeping your customers, they're not canceling. Ideally, they're expanding, the amount of money they spend with you. But in e-commerce, even it's true, and you have the same thing where you have repeat visits, recurring customers as well. If you have a store online and someone visits you once and buys something one time, it's nice, but they're not a very valuable customer. So you want to try to get them to come back as much as possible. So that's a retention issue. And so when you don't get those people, you should view that as churn, because they've churned out of your service and there's no loyalty to your store.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that's important to remember, because as you say, it's not just a B2B problem, right? It's a problem for any kind of repeat business. So, with e-commerce, what we're talking about is important, but this is anything where somebody would need to buy a similar product or service again and doesn't use you, but could. And what we're really talking about here is not just losing the revenue from that single transaction, whether it is a can of soda or like a multi-$1,000 a month software package. We're talking about losing that person's revenue over their entire lifetime, as well as your cost of acquisition the first time. So the actual loss is huge because it did cost you money to bring that person on the first time, anywhere from a few cents to a few $1,000s, right? And when you add that up over lots of customers, it's a really big thing. It also removes that person from your list of customers and puts them in your competitors' list of customers, because they're going to get what they need somewhere, and if it's not you, it's a problem.
Exactly. And actually, even before the internet, CPGs knew this as well, right? Like if you're competing for shelf space in a store, you're in a highly commoditized business, you're selling soap or deodorant or whatever, you basically are trying to figure out how to get those people to be customers over and over again of the same brand, because that's the only way you're gonna keep up those multi-billion-dollar revenues.
And it's a lot harder to regain a lost customer than it is to get them the first time. So what we're really talking about here is like nearly 5 times harder to get someone back once you've upset them enough to not use you again. So this is a lot of times where people talk about like product reliability and uptime for software products and things like that being an issue, but there's a lot of things that affect customer retention. So I want to talk a little bit about how folks in the marketing space and people who have access to marketing data can kind of take over some of that responsibility, and really, because it really does help increase the bottom line, and that's good for everybody. So what we're really talking about is kind of keeping customers happy. And, I think one of the things that's interesting too is some people don't know that they have a churn problem or like a retention problem, depending on what their role is. So my kind of rule of thumb here is if you don't know your churn rate, 1, ask and see if somebody will tell you. There's no harm. And 2, if you don't know and somebody won't tell you, just assume you do have a problem and that you should be addressing it, because no better way to prevent something than fix it before it happens. Whole ounce of prevention, pound of cure adage. So Talking about keeping your customers happy from like a marketing perspective, like within your brand, I would say that there's a few kind of core things to remember, and we'll talk about each of them. The first is knowing what problem that they had in the first place that led them to you. So like
Yep.
kind of can of soda thing is somebody was thirsty and they have a lot of choices like water, juice, milk, soda, whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
thirst equals I want something, or caffeine equals I have Starbucks, or I could get a can of Coke.
Yep.
Um, knowing why they chose you over another option. Was it proximity? Was it price? There's a million different reasons that people make choices. You need to know why you're the option. The third is knowing what they're using you for and how. So a lot of times people use our products in ways that we didn't necessarily imagine that we'd use products. And that's something that you and I have learned by having customer dinners and chatting with our
Definitely.
users, being like, had no idea that that's actually what you were using the product for.
Yeah.
Figuring out where they still have questions or want improvements. So talking to them about like, hey, what are still some things that you're challenged with, and how might we be able to be the answer to that? And the last is showing them that you're listening to them. So that's kind of my list of things that you should be looking for in terms of data. So let's start with the first one. Knowing what problem they had in the first place that led them to you. This is one of the easiest things in my estimation to find out, which is there's a number of different things that I look at. One is like looking at search data sorted by keyword and topic. Another one is looking at your competitors' search and social data sorted by keyword and topic. And the other is a market exploration board, and I'll kind of post a link to that on the follow-up blog post. I don't want to spend too much time getting into it, but what that really is a way to dig in and see, based on your industry, what keywords, topics, and types of conversations are happening when people are discussing needing a solution. So it kind of takes into account everything from search to forums to blog posts to social media, everything that's a discussion amongst actual users about their issues and how people are talking about solving it. So from the kind of like the search perspective for you and your competitors, Ray, talk a little bit about kind of how getting groups of keywords and topics and like getting to know those kind of grouped things about your products is really helpful. I mean, because I know that works from an e-commerce perspective for sure, but also from a B2B and general business perspective.
Keyword grouping, topic grouping is it's actually a really powerful tool that people have, and we're always encouraging our customers to do it as much as possible, because I think a lot of times people focus still very much on ranking of individual keywords and everything else, and it makes sense because it's quite intuitive. But the thing that's cool about topic grouping is it lets you kind of get above the day-to-day thing that you're thinking about, with whatever content you're writing, kind of focus on the big picture a little bit more. And by grouping a lot of your keywords into topics that you think your audience cares about, it lets you come back to those topics again and again. When you think about one keyword, you're like, okay, well, I already wrote the article to target this keyword, and we think we're going to get this much target traffic from it and everything else. But if you have a topic, then you can start building these themes around your business that you want to write about, and you can use that as a recurring source of ideas.
It's totally true, and one of the things that we also see people miss out on in terms of an opportunity is not going back and regrouping keywords based on kind of product ideas. So, let's talk a little bit about, we're going to come back to that later on because it's part of kind of a bigger picture, but this also helps us discover, like, why did they choose you? So some things that you can look at, and a lot of this goes into what you and I often refer to as like cohort analysis, right? So creating groups of people that are cohorts, which means, and a cohort can be a variety of different things. It can be customers that came in based on like a quarter or fiscal year. It can be customers that came in from a particular campaign. It can be people grouped by geography. A cohort is simply a way to describe a group of people that have similar attributes, and people can belong to multiple cohorts. And there's a lot of software and things like that that'll help you kind of manage some of this, but you can also do some of this on your own. So looking at kind of why they chose you. You should be able to know what features people are using most, or like what specific types of brands or products they're choosing most. So on the e-commerce side, this is like the actual products and things from your line that they are most often purchasing. So like if you're making jeans, what particular cut, style, wash, whatever, of denim are they choosing most? And on a product like our side, are they choosing things like competitor discovery and analysis, or are they doing things like keyword rank or social engagement? Like, it's really important to know this stuff.
Yep.
Second is kind of this idea back to like, what are they talking about in customer support areas? What FAQs get the most views? Like, where on the site in terms of all of your feature overview and support information are people who are existing customers going? And you need to be able to kind of segment out people that are kind of existing users and in your product or purchasing from people who are just prospective, because those views are going to be very different.
Yep.
Next is what landing page were they on directly before a sale, right? So what was the last thing they looked at before they decided to purchase? Because chances are that was the thing that made them be like, oh, hey, I actually would spend money on this. Like, whatever that is, probably important. And then where do they go most often after an initial purchase? So if they come back to content that you have domain over, where in your content sphere are they going once they've purchased? Are they looking for more information?
Yep.
Like, are they looking for additional products? Are they looking to purchase the same thing again? Are they looking to recommend it to someone else? Like, what's happening? And if they are looking for additional information, this is a great opportunity for marketers, because it means that they're looking for more information around this, and you could create content that is naturally going to get a lot of traction.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's I think it's the temptation is once you have a customer, and it kind of goes back to what we're talking about overall, right? Where you have a customer and you're happy that they bought something, but then you're thinking already about the next customer, and you're not paying attention to how can you get that customer to buy again. And to your point, in order to actually understand their psychology, why they bought something, if you can look at the content that they're interacting with the most on your website, you can really get a good feel for what motivates them. I think this is one of the reasons that Amazon was always successful, because their recommendation engine is probably obviously by far the best in the industry. But what it's doing is it's not just looking at your products that you bought in the past. It's actually, they've built this map of all of these other things that are likely to be appealing to people who have bought things in the past. And they could be entirely different product categories. They could be, you could be reading a certain type of book, and they've done the analysis to say, okay, based on that, you probably are also interested in this gardens tool set, like something that's completely seems irrelevant, but they've got a psychological profile on you. So not everyone has the budget, of course, to do that, but it's an interesting clue into the types of insights that you can get by looking at what people are actually reading and paying attention to.
It is really interesting, because one of the things that when we're talking about kind of like this behavioral profiling situation, which is really popular and important and is a huge part of where people's marketing analytics and marketing data goes, and a big purchase thing for a lot of companies out there, right? Like, people are spending a ton of money on getting this information because it is super valuable. And it often, it can net out millions or billions of dollars, but it can also be a little bit problematic. One example of kind of a partnership that you see actually now but didn't used to be a thing is they did an analysis where it was like, people who shop at Target most frequently buy Starbucks coffee and often use Apple products. And so now there's a Starbucks in almost every Target, and Target is an Apple reseller, and it's like a natural thing, right? Apparently. But like, these are not three things that people would have initially been like, I'm in Target, I should get coffee and an iPhone. But now it's like all together. And the other thing that, happened was, there was a woman, and it's a really great case study for marketers. She bought like 4 particular things, like ice cream, like a particular medicine, and then like something else. And for some reason, all of these things pointed to the fact that she was pregnant, but she did not know she was pregnant. And they sent like baby and maternity pamphlets to her house, like somebody, because they resell their marketing data. And they sent all this baby stuff to her house, where unfortunately she lived with her parents, and they found out, and it became like this really big snafu, right? So there is a lot of marketing data that can point you in the right direction to help keep customers, but there's also some idea of like, don't be super creepy about it. Okay, so back on topic, even though I really like that fun aside, like, you find out you're pregnant because you bought like some random stuff from Target.
Well, the more amusing thing is that your parents find out you're pregnant before you do.
I mean,
not amusing for her, probably, but for everyone else.
I'm sure it eventually ended in a very joyous occasion for everybody. Okay, so kind of what are they using you for and how? And this goes, like we were talking about, sometimes you don't know how people are specifically using your product, and you can come across great features that you could market or that other people might be interested in if you find out how specifically people are utilizing what you're doing.
Yep.
So one of the things too that's interesting is you can actually group people into cohorts this way, right? Like by how they're using your product. So for us, there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but some examples might be agency users versus in-house marketers, or
Yep.
people who are strictly trying to like solve a reporting functionality, like an automated reporting problem,
Yeah.
versus people who are trying to do a lot of like really deep analysis and create new content. So how somebody is specifically utilizing the product means that we can actually group them together and then market to them and provide resources to them based on those specific needs.
Yep.
And then like one of the other things that's interesting to look at here is, do certain kind of customer segments look at certain types of marketing more? So for example, it's interesting to note, like, does a particular cohort of people really respond well to email while another cohort actually really responds well to social media? So like, it's interesting to know how you need to market to your customers in order to keep them happy.
The thing, whenever we talk about this, the thing that always strikes me is the there's actually a lot of difficulty in doing that well. And surprisingly, the state of the industry is that the tools are still pretty rudimentary. I mean, if you look at all of the marketing automation companies, they have businesses pretty much because they're able to execute on that particular bullet point that you just mentioned. They're able to answer that question of, what does this segment do versus this segment, and what do they respond to the most, and you're able to send customized, personalized campaigns to them. But I mean, every company that we know that we talk to still struggles with their marketing automation platform because it's a pretty complex operation that you're engaging with, and the tools, they're good, but there's I think just still a long way to go. So this is going to be an area where I think you're going to see a lot more growth and innovation because it's one of the most powerful things you can do, and there's still a lot of companies just addressing like the lowest hanging fruit part of that problem.
It is a really big challenge, and I do think we'll continue to see growth. And I think it's there's a lot of problems with it, and I would say that one of the things that continues to be a struggle for a lot of folks is when you inherit a marketing team or like a marketing platform and kind of a bunch of data, because most people are not starting from scratch, like most people have some sort of existing set of data. Yep. Is this idea of setup, right? So one of the things you can do to segment people out yourself and do some of this cohort analysis yourself is, you can kind of create these buckets, and you can actually look at people in them, but you have to actually spend the time to create the buckets. Like, yep. You have to take the time to do this. Yep. But one of the things that you can actually look at once you do is, kind of being able to do these separations as to like what features or how they're using you is interesting. But one of the other things you'll find out is, where do they still have questions or want improvements? So, yep. Like, if you continue contact with people who have purchased once or people who are current users of your product, and like, let's say, I'll take email marketing as an example. Say you send out 10 emails over the course of a couple months. Knowing which cohorts open which emails will tell you a lot about what specific needs you're meeting or not meeting, because whatever they're opening is probably like the thing where they still have a concern or a question or a feature that they are power using, right? Yep. And so that's something that you should be able to know and see. Now, of course, if you're just sending out the same email to everyone all at once, and you don't have any way to kind of slice and dice that data, then you're just being like, oh, I've got a 20% open rate, okay. Yeah. But you don't know, is that actually like 80% of one cohort and 0% of another that's yep. making that final open rate what it is, right? And like, that's a really important distinction. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this area of marketing and this area of data in general does have a really long way to go, and the constant proliferation of new channels and new distribution techniques and tools is probably slowing the process because everybody always feels like they need to wait and add in all of these like channels and distribution methods into their platform to get this like full view. But in actuality, you really don't. You really only need a few core things.
Yep.
Like you need search, you need some main social, you need email, and probably like some paid. But inside of social, I'm counting things like forums, blogs, and stuff like that to
Yeah.
be part of the ecosystem. But other than that, I think you're probably good.
And yeah, because people, it's true. There is a surprising amount of stuff that you can do with a few simple tools, and people tend to kind of overwhelm themselves and think they have to do all these certain things because they heard about it at a conference, or everyone's talking about it like they're conferences, articles, and everything else. They're classic for making everyone seem amazing when actually, we talk to people day in and day out and they're like, dude, I'm just struggling to write a blog every week, like that's, and we tell them, and if you can do that consistently, and you just email the blog post that you write out, you're pretty far along in the game. So I think it's a nice thing to be able to focus like that.
It's totally true, and one of the things that we talked about previously that, I mean, is still a really big problem is people are now like, I don't have time to write and come up with my own stuff because I'm too busy doing all of these other tasks, and so then they're outsourcing like the actual critical thing, right?
Yeah.
And the critical thing is original, unique, good, compelling content. So I would actually outsource all the other crap. Like, don't outsource the creative, real thought leadership piece because that's the thing that nobody else could really do. So then you're putting up all this content that's kind of like watered down and you're paying money for it. And you're like, oh, but we've posted 12 new blog posts this month and we've paid, like $5,000 for them or $10,000 or whatever it is. Like, why aren't we getting more traffic? And it's like, well, because your blog post sucks.
Yeah.
And you're actually turning people away. So speaking of turning people away, the last thing that that's kind of part of this, keeping people there and not like customer retention ideas, showing them that you're listening. So, you've got all this cohort analysis stuff. They're looking at your stuff, like they're going through your content. They've purchased something from you once. Show them that you are actually paying attention to what they're doing, and send them updates on what you're doing to improve their experience, and ask them for additional feedback. You won't always get people to respond because people are busy, but the people that do are really engaged. I also think it's really important to go back and improve or update old support pages, FAQs, how-to guides, and educational materials as often as it is relevant or as you can. And check out how that stuff kind of performs across all of your content. And I think it's also really important, like, don't skimp on screenshots and videos just because they take a little bit longer to put together, because they're really helpful. People love them some visual content. And share your educational material via different channels. Like, don't just post it on your site or email it out to somebody when they ask for it. Put that stuff everywhere. Put it on SlideShare. Put it on social. Like, throw blog posts up about support stuff. Like, there's all kinds of really cool things. And I mean, people can scroll through and find it better then, and they don't have to dig around through like this myriad of like support nonsense on some like page that's just like a list of links.
Well, and if you're going to take the extra trouble to create the visual content, you definitely should be sharing it on those mediums where visual content is most effective. Pinterest, SlideShare, Instagram, or YouTube, obviously as well if you have videos. So you can get a lot of. It may not be the same volume as your website traffic, but you're going to get a lot of long tail referrals, and you're also going to get a lot of more kind of serendipitous visits to your website based on just people are in different parts of the internet, and it's almost like free display ads. You're basically capturing the same sort of psychological mechanism that display ads do, but they're not annoying, and they're in the middle of other content that people are trying to look at.
I always think it's funny when people are like, will only put like advertising pictures or like these, fake reel shots on Pinterest. Like, brands will do that.
Yep.
And then they won't actually put anything else up there. I was like, so maybe it is something like an Apple core, right? That like there's like a pretty shot of, but I actually wouldn't mind seeing a really well done visual of how to use it put on there too, right? And B2B has the same thing, right? And I tell people this all the time. If you don't make ugly content, it's not bad to post it somewhere like Pinterest, right? If there was a really, really pretty visual way on like how to create a blog post or how to make a video, and somebody wanted to put up a really pretty illustration of that somewhere, there's no reason to not repin that, right? There's no reason it just has to only be cupcakes and wedding dresses. Like, there can be other stuff on there.
Yep.
Okay, so let's wrap this up because we've got 5 minutes left to talk about where you can look for data in your organization, both marketing and kind of like otherwise, to kind of aggregate and find some commonalities to create these cohorts and to learn some more stuff. So first of all, very obvious one is email opens. What subject lines are most popular with customers, and how does that compare to their keyword data? So compare what's going on with subject lines to what people are searching for. And if you're not cross-pollinating those two, then go back and watch some of the old Found Friday videos because I talk about it a lot. So also, how can you leverage what people are reading and opening most in emails into other areas of marketing? Because obviously it's something that your current customers care about. Next, search. So what are people still looking for once they're actually using your product? Take a look at like kind of what they're still looking for or discussing and turn it into content that'll actually keep them engaged with you. Popular site content. So what content are they consuming the most and how is it different from non-customers? You should actually be able to see kind of current user consumption versus like non-user consumption, and take a look at what landing pages and stuff those people are looking at. Social media. So what are they talking about in your space? Are competitors talking to them and trying to steal them away from you? And can you leverage their network of people to try to get more customers or kind of like build up more of this conversation? And the last that people miss out on a lot is customer support. So like what are the most frequent issues for current customers? Your customer support team, if you have one, or wherever you keep all of these kind of inbound support requests, should be like segmented by like questions from people who are users and questions from people who are just kind of out there. And then are these issues something that could be better explained or resolved with better content from your department, which is like video overviews, better initial messaging, cool graphics and visuals like what we were just talking about. Like could you actually help quell some support issues by just creating better content at the onset?
Yep. You mentioned probably 5 things here that are, again, it goes back to the fact that these are all, from a technology perspective, pretty simple tools, pretty simple things that you can do, which is good because you need simplicity, you need the ability to access the sort of data very quickly. But these are 5 things that I can't think of a single company that I know that's consistently being able to do all of these at the same time in terms of the conversations we've had, and people are honest with us. They're talking about the struggles that we have, and so you're able to do even 3 or 4 of these, or even 2 or 3. You're doing really well. So if you're doing all 5 consistently, and you've got a process built around this, then you're probably going to be hitting it out of the park. And the challenge, of course, is the ability to actually respond to it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, what we're really talking about is sharing information around other things that people are working on. So if you're not a marketing department of one and you're not solely responsible for creating the content, sending out the emails, sharing it on social, doing all this other stuff, which if you are, you probably do have some insight into how all this is working,
yep.
Is your job doesn't stop once you've attracted the lead or attracted the person to make the purchase. Your job is to make sure that they continue to make that decision over time. Yep. And so thinking that you only have to get them in the door is kind of a short-sighted view of like what the entire ecosystem and what your real bottom line is going to look like. So getting access to all of this data and being kind of the champion in your organization for making sure that all of this information actually leads to customer retention and better marketing material from the get-go is really important. Because like if you actually just create the best possible content from the start, and if you actually build in retention to all of your marketing efforts as a general like idea, if you keep it in the back of your head no matter what you're doing, then you're not going to have to spend as much time saving people or like begging them to come back or whatever is happening.
Yep. Absolutely.
There's hopefully some good kind of information about some steps and things like that we always include in the blog afterwards. So go and check that out for the list, and I'll also include a few of the older videos and things where we touch on some visual content ideas that we've had, as well as ways to take data from kind of initial sources and use it to make better marketing decisions kind of throughout the entire ecosystem. So with that, we're actually out of time. So everybody have an awesome and safe Friday the 13th, and we will see you next time.
Have a good one.
Bye.